Thank you and welcome to Carter Park for the opening of our summer concert season. Our theme tonight is Under the Big Top, so you're going to hear music associated with the circus. And what could be more associated with circuses than our opening march by the great Carl Lawrence King. You're going to hear that name a lot tonight, entitled Barnum and Bailey's Favorite. And we also have some very special guests tonight named King, which we'll talk about later. Not related to the composer, but they are related to Carl King, but that's another story. We continue with another great piece of music heavily associated with circuses. Wasn't written for the circus, but like a lot of the numbers we'll be performing tonight, it eventually became strongly associated with the circus. And if you've ever been to a circus and seen the trapeze artists, this next number is probably the most identified with the trapeze act. It's by a Mexican composer named Juventino Rosas, and its title is Sobre las Olas, which is translated roughly as Over the Waves. My grandnieces are here from Virginia tonight. So I'm gonna, thank you. I'm going to give them roles in this concert. And we're gonna do it in order of age. So we're gonna have Lily first. Oh, Gianna. Okay. Well, they're in Virginia. How can I keep track? So Gianna, come on up. We have a role for you. You're going to be the ringmaster. And you know what the ringmaster's job is? Do you know? The ringmaster blows the whistle to start the circus. So do you think you can do that? Go ahead and put the whistle on while I tell the audience what we're going to play. So Carl Lawrence King was the great composer of circus music in the United States. He played and eventually led the the Barnum and Bailey circus before it became Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey. But he also toured and played baritone horn with many other circuses back at the turn of the 20th century. And his music still survives. Barnum and Bailey's favorite, obviously, was one of his. And we'll be playing others this evening. This next one is one of Carl King's compositions, and it's entitled The Home Stretch. And this is called a gallop. A gallop is a march that's played very fast. And in the circus, these are used to distract the audience. So, I mean, they're also used for other things, but if anything goes wrong in the circus, like, you know, God forbid someone falls from the trapeze or there's an accident or something, the band leader will kick off a gallop. And in the circus world, these are known as screamers. So we're going to do this home stretch by Carl King as fast as we can play it. And Gianna's going to start us with the ringmaster's whistle. So wait for me. How about our ringmaster, Gianna King? within the program of the circus, there are so many different acts. There's the trapeze, there's the tightrope walkers, there are the animal acts, and so on and so forth. And the circus band has to be prepared to perform music for all of it, all different acts and magicians and clowns and twirlers and tumblers. And we'll be doing some of that tumbler music later. But they also had to have music for the animal acts. And the circus was, for a lot of urban kids, the circus was the only place where they would see exotic animals. Lions, tigers, camels, elephants. That was the only time they'd see them. And that's why one of the reasons it's so sad that with the recent demise of the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, you know, the ending the elephant act kind of did them in. But, it was always kind of cool to go out by the cages and see all the wild, well, not so wild, but captive exotic animals. And so, like I said, the band leader always had to have music that would accompany these various and sundry animal acts. So we have one in our library that just happens to fit the camel. And this is one that's actually been in our library for many years, but it's great circus music to accompany camels. And this is entitled Arabian Nights. So you can imagine yourself in the circus tent, and they bring these camels around the ring, and this is what they play. The march we just finished, of course, was the Billboard March by John Clore, well known at circuses. Another one of those melodies that everyone knows, but no one knows the name of, right? Well, now you know. It's the Billboard March. And next we have a treat for you. This is one that saw great use in the circus, mostly for the clowns and the tumblers and anything that was lighthearted and comedic. And what instrument do you turn to when you're looking for lighthearted and comedic? You turn to the trombone. And another one of the great American march composers and circus composers was the great Henry Fillmore. Wrote many, many great marches. In fact, this program wouldn't be complete without including some of his work. And this is probably his best known work. And you can imagine the clowns and the tumblers and all of that funny stuff going on in the circus while you hear our featured section, our trombone section on Henry Fillmore's Lassus trombone. How about our trombone section? Dan Walker, Ken Anderson, Kim Rodderquins. One of the circuses that the great Carl King performed with was the Robinsons, I think it was called Robinson's Great Circus, or Robinson's Big Circus, or something along those lines. And that circus existed back in the late 1890s through the 1920s or so. And he wrote this march to be the grand opening of their program, but he wrote it on the last day of their tour. And legend has it that he wrote it while he was sitting on a trunk, a storage trunk. Don't know if that's true, but it certainly came out to be a fine march, and this is Robinson's Grand Entree. So we're going to take one of these pieces out of order. We were going to do this gallop later in the concert, but I want to do it a little bit earlier while my grandnieces are still awake. So Lily, I want you to come on up. How about a nice welcome for Lily King? So I mentioned earlier that we had King members in the audience. They're not related to Carl Lawrence King, but here's the funny thing. Their grandfather, his name was Carl King. And when my niece first told me she was marrying a king, of course, the first thing that came to my mind, well, is he related to Carl King? And she said, yes, that's his father. And I said, wait a minute. Carl King died in 1980, whatever it was. I said, that can't be the Carl King. But of course, to these kids, it was the Carl King. And sadly, he's now passed away as well. But and he spelled it with a K also, just like Carl Lawrence King. But their granddad was Carl King, so we're going to do this for the other Carl King. And this is Carl Lawrence King's composition, Circus Days. This is another one of those screamers, so we're going to play it as fast as we can. And Lily's going to be the ring mistress, and she's going to blow that whistle. Carl King was a true American story. You know, he was born in Ohio, learned to play the baritone horn and the cornet, and he literally ran away from home to join the circus. That's what he actually did. And the circus became his life for the next 30 years or so. And he eventually rose to the position of bandmaster of the Barnum and Bailey Circus. And after he retired from that, he went back home to Ohio briefly, and then he saw an ad in a trade publication that the town of Fort Dodge, Iowa, was looking for a bandmaster for their town band. So he applied for it, and he went and auditioned, and he was appointed to the position. And for the next 50 years or so, he directed the Fort Dodge, Iowa Municipal Band, which is now known as the Carl King Band in his memory. He moved, of course, he and his wife moved to Fort Dodge. He started his publishing company there, and he wrote his music there. He had a little music store. His wife ran the music store in the front, and in the back was Carl King, you know, writing his scores and publishing them, selling them. And he also took the Fort Dodge Band all over the country to various music festivals. You know, back in those days, they used to have all kinds of state fairs, and they would go to Oklahoma and Texas, Montana. They went all over the place, and they really put Fort Dodge, Iowa on the map. And he became Fort Dodge's favorite son. And many years later, he lived to see the day that they built this bridge over this kind of like a canyon in Fort Dodge. And they named the bridge the Carl King Memorial Bridge after him. I guess not memorial because he was still living, but he got to cut the ribbon. So if you go to Fort Dodge, Iowa today, you'll see that bridge is still there, I would imagine. And we still have his music to listen to and enjoy. And this next one is one that came to our attention about late 1990s, and we just loved it. This is one that King wrote for the Tumblers. I mentioned the Tumblers earlier, and I think there's a story in the program about these two gentlemen that he particularly wrote this for because I guess they wore a frog costume or something. But he entitled this The Walking Frog, and it's a quintessential example of the kind of ragtime music that bands of this type played in that era, in the late teens and early 1920s. Lassus trombone, which we played earlier, is another very good example, and this is one more. We recorded this on our CD, number 17, so thank you. If you have that CD, you'll be familiar with this next number. It's entitled The Walking Frog by Carl Lawrence King. That was a great circus march entitled Invictus, and that was by none other than, who else, Carl Lawrence King. And we are going to next perform another waltz. Waltzes were used in the circus, again, for anything that was not fast-paced or funny would oftentimes be a waltz. So tightrope, trapeze, the dancers. And this is one of the waltzes that was commonly used in the circus. This is by the Viennese composer Franz Lehar, who of course was best known for The Merry Widow. But this is another one of his compositions. This is known as the Gold and Silver Waltz. And while we're talking about gold and silver, don't forget that you can donate to the Leominster Colonial Band. And we're thank you, we're a 501c3 organization, so all of your contributions are tax deductible. And thank you to all of the patrons who have given so generously and make all of this possible. A lot of new music this year, and the new music is directly attributable to the donors who have given. So thank you so much. And we continue with the Gold and Silver Waltz. We're going to conclude our concert with our traditional God Bless America in the Eric Lydson arrangement. And we invite you to join us again next week, weather permitting, here at Carter Park. And just a reminder, if the weather is not permitting, Leominster City Hall will be. So we'll be over there at the Tata Auditorium in the event of inclement weather. So we bid you good night with God Bless America.